Story 1. She kept knocking from under my balcony, but I live on the 5th floor. This happened to me in late 2020, during one of the rainiest weeks we'd had in a long time. I live in an old apartment building in downtown Vancouver. One of those brutalist concrete slabs from the 70s with narrow balconies, rusting railings, and the sound of pipes running through every wall. My unit is on the 5th floor, directly facing a residential street that slopes down toward the harbor. I live alone. Had been for about 2 years. The apartment was nothing special. Beige carpet, tiny galley kitchen, cracked tile in the bathroom. But I liked it for the view. On clear days, I could see across the water to the mountains. But for most of that week, everything had been swallowed in rain. I remember the weather because it was all I heard. The steady, almost hypnotic hissing of rain on glass, on concrete, on metal gutters. It became background noise to everything. Even in my sleep, it was there, like static woven into the fabric of the building itself. The first time I heard the knock, I was in bed. I had one earbud in, listening to a sleep podcast. The rain was coming down hard enough to rattle the balcony door. Around 2:00 a.m., I thought I heard something behind it, a dull, hollow tap. I sat up, took the earbud out. Silence, except for the rain. But it wasn't silence. Not exactly. There was another knock. Faint, deliberate, spaced out. Not like someone trying to get in, more like someone checking. It sounded wrong. I know how knocks echo when they come from the hallway. I know how they sound when someone pounds on your ceiling. But this knock, it felt like it came from below, directly beneath the balcony, like it was pressing upward through the concrete. I got out of bed and opened the blinds. Just grey-black rain and the amber glow of a flickering street lamp. I stepped closer, cupped my hand to the glass. Nothing but the soft, endless hiss of water, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the knock wasn't just sound. It felt placed, not performed, but embedded, like something had managed to bypass my ears and land straight in my chest. That's how I described it to myself at the time, like a voice trying to force memory into sensation. I didn't go out on the balcony. I told myself it was the pipes, or maybe the wind. The storm was loud. Sound did strange things in old buildings. But the next night I heard it again. Same time, same knock, same wrong direction. I tried to ignore it. Third night it changed. It came earlier, around 1:43 a.m., and it was sharper, not louder, just clearer, like the rain had parted around it. I remember freezing mid-breath when it started. 4 knocks, measured, wooden, as if on the underside of a hollow box. I stood by the sliding door again. My hands were cold. The glass fogged slightly where I leaned in. No one, no movement. Just the layered rhythm of rain on rooftops, rain in gutters, rain on my balcony. And beneath it, something that didn't echo. It didn't fade with distance. It pressed inward, as if the building itself was carrying the sound up to me. I thought about going down to the street, about checking the unit below mine, but I didn't, I couldn't. There was a tightness in my chest that kept me frozen in place. The 4th night, the knocking didn't come, but I still couldn't sleep. I stayed by the window, waiting, listening, rain smearing the world into motionless shapes. It didn't come, but something else did. At exactly 2:08 a.m., I heard the doorbell ring, not mine. It was faint, like someone pressing the buzzer from the lobby downstairs. But the timing made no sense. The entrance locked automatically at midnight. You needed a key or someone to buzz you in. Then, 5 minutes later, the knock returned. This time, it was closer. Not from under the balcony. From behind the balcony door. I stood there in the dark, barely breathing. The knock came again, not loud, not frantic, and I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. There was no echo, not from the walls, not from the floor. It was as if the sound had no source, only direction. It didn't ask to be heard. It expected to be remembered. The first puddle appeared the morning after the 5th night. I woke up to the usual hiss of rain. The air in the apartment felt denser than normal, like it hadn't moved in hours. I stepped out of bed and the floor was damp. I keep a rug near the balcony door, one of those old scratchy ones that came with the unit. It was soaked. The laminate beneath it was streaked with water. I stood there for a minute, confused. The door had been locked all night. The window was shut. There were no plants, no spills, no boot tracks. Just that one spot, directly in front of the glass, wet, dark, and oddly shaped. I got a towel and dried it up, touched the seal along the sliding door. Nothing leaked, no condensation. It didn't make sense. I thought maybe it was a buildup of moisture from the rain, a weird draft maybe, and moved on. But the next morning the puddle was back, slightly larger, same place. This time I checked the ceiling. I checked the hallway. I even went out onto the balcony. Nothing. The outside concrete was wet. Of course it was, but there were no signs of water coming inside. I crouched to get a closer look at the stain on the floor. It was darker in the middle, with thin streaks branching outward, not quite radial, more like shapes. Narrow, asymmetrical shapes. 4, maybe 5, elongated like toes. I didn't want to name it. Didn't want to think footprints, but they were bare, wide set, pointed inward toward the door, and they weren't smudged like normal prints. They looked inverted, like someone had been standing on the ceiling below me. I wiped it all again, moved the rug, laid down newspaper that night to track the moisture. At 3:12 a.m. I woke up. There hadn't been a sound, but something was off. The air felt displaced, like it had shifted weight. I walked toward the balcony and paused. The newspaper I'd laid out was soaked, and there, clear as day, were 5 upside-down footprints, bare, slanted, as if someone had pressed their feet against the glass from the outside, but from below. I unlocked the balcony door and stepped out into the rain. I don't know what I was expecting. Nothing was there, no figure, no movement, just a cold wind and the endless water sliding down every surface. I leaned over the railing and looked down. The unit beneath mine had its lights off. The balcony was empty, just a potted plant sagging with rain. But I saw something else. A small circle of water on the concrete, faint, barely visible, but round, shaped like the heel of a foot. I went back inside and locked the door. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I started researching it. Not hauntings, not directly, but acoustic illusions. Structural sound transfer, vertical phasing, anything that could explain what I was hearing. That's when I came across a phrase I hadn't heard before. Vertical dissonance. The article was a case study about sensory displacement in multi-level buildings. Situations where people report sounds or sensations that don't come from their own floor, but from layers above or below. Often during periods of consistent environmental noise, like rainfall. The idea was that trauma in some cases doesn't linger in space. It lingers in perspective, not a location, but a level. I couldn't get that phrase out of my head. It was raining again that night, harder than before. I sat up listening. No knocking, no doorbell, just that same sensory compression, like the sound of the rain was pressing downward. I made a decision I'd been avoiding. I went down to the 4th floor. The hallway was silent, dim. I hadn't been down there in over a year. The unit directly below mine, 402, had a paper notice taped to the door, faded, dated 2 years ago. Something about vacancy status and property access. I knocked anyway. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, staring at the door. Then I noticed the mail slot. Something had been stuffed in from the inside, a crumpled piece of cloth. I crouched to look closer. It was a sleeve, a grey cotton sleeve, stiff from water damage. I stood up, walked to the side of the hallway and looked out the narrow vertical window. From there, I could see the balcony. The glass door was fogged, like it had been closed for a long time. But on the inside of the railing, where no rain could reach, was a single handprint, pressed flat, fingers spread, palm tilted inward, as if someone had leaned forward and braced themselves, not to look out, but to look up. Back in my apartment, I stood by the balcony. I opened the door one more time. There was no sound, just the rain falling straight down. But for a moment, I swore I felt pressure beneath my feet. Not a vibration. Just the sensation of something occupying the same vertical space right under me. I haven't opened the balcony door since, not because I'm afraid of what's outside, but because I'm afraid of what might be trying to come up through it. Story 2. My windshield wouldn't fog, but something was writing on it. This happened to me last November on a stretch of highway between Madison and Janesville. I work freelance IT, mostly remote jobs, but once a week I make a 3-hour drive to meet with a client in southern Wisconsin. It's mostly back roads and old industrial suburbs, gas stations, train crossings, long stretches of nothing. That particular night, the temperature had dropped fast. Rain earlier had turned to mist, and by the time I left the office around 9 p.m., visibility was low and everything was coated in cold vapor. Not quite fog, but the kind of moisture that seeps into the corners of things. Windows, mirrors, your clothes. I got into my car, started the engine, and sat for a minute waiting for the heat to kick in. It's a 97 Camry, no defogger. I rely on old tricks, cracking a window, turning the dial to feet and windshield, blasting heat, and praying it clears up. Except this time, the windshield wouldn't fog at all. It was strange. The air was cold enough, and my breath was visible in the cabin, little clouds curling in front of me. But the glass stayed clear. Not spotless, not clean, just resistant. The inside of the windshield felt colder than it should have. I touched it, expecting condensation. Nothing. Just smooth, dry glass, no trace of moisture. It unsettled me, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I pulled out of the parking lot and began the long drive back north. The roads were empty, wet pavement, flickering traffic lights, street lights reflected on the surface like melted coins. Everything was muffled, even the radio. I remember turning it down halfway through a song. There was something about the silence outside that made the sound inside feel intrusive. I passed through a small town, one of those barely there places with a single gas station and a shuttered antique store. Rain started again, light but steady. Then I noticed the writing. It started in the upper left corner of the windshield, just a faint curve at first. I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from a sign I'd passed. But it grew. A line curved downward, then another intersected it. A loop, a diagonal slash. Letters. They formed slowly, as if someone was dragging a finger through the mist, except the windshield wasn't fogged. I slowed down, squinted. It was a word, or part of one. I rubbed the inside of the glass with my sleeve, but there was nothing there. No smear, no moisture. The marks didn't fade. They were inside the glass, but not on it. The curves were too precise to be random, not like something from airflow or temperature gradients. This looked intentional. The car was sealed. I hadn't opened a window since leaving the office. The vents blew warm air. My breath, I tested it, fogged up the side window just fine. But the windshield, nothing. I kept driving, heart starting to pick up. The word became clearer, 3 letters now. Y-O. The third wasn't finished. I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter and trying not to blink. The curve of the O was shaky, uneven, like whoever or whatever one was writing it was struggling to remember how it should look. Not how it felt, how it looked. It felt deliberate, like someone was tracing a memory into space, not to communicate, but to reenact. I pulled over at a rest stop. The lot was empty, just wet concrete and a single buzzing overhead light that flickered once every 6 seconds. I sat there for a moment, breathing slow, watching. The letters remained on the glass, still visible even with the heat on full blast. But they weren't fresh. They looked like they'd been drawn into frost, except the glass was still dry. I turned the engine off. Silence. I reached forward and touched the letters again. Nothing. No smear. No moisture. Just that unnatural curve, bending away from me. I started to wonder if it was even written from my side. I took a deep breath and wiped the whole windshield with a microfiber cloth from the glove box. Front to back, top to bottom. It was clean. I turned the ignition and the lights flicked back on. Nothing on the glass now, just empty rain. My reflection in the driver's side window. I sat back. Then I noticed the word again. Only this time, it wasn't inside. It was on the outside of the windshield, same curve, same letters, U, but backward, as if meant to be read from inside. I stepped out of the car. Cold slapped my face immediately, rain hitting my ears. I walked to the front and examined the windshield. Nothing was there. From the outside, the glass was blank. Rain streamed down it, no writing, no residue, not even the faint oil smudge that fingers leave behind. But when I got back in, the word was waiting again. Same 3 letters. Still reversed, still wrong. And then I caught something in the rearview mirror, a movement, a shadow, just enough to trigger recognition, but not enough to name it. I turned around, quickly. The back seat was empty, but the middle section of the seat, where the cushion dipped slightly, was dark, saturated, like wet clothing had been sitting there, a round shape, indented, glossy in the low dome light. I reached back, fingertips trembling. The fabric was soaked, no smell, no warmth, just that unnatural dampness that doesn't come from weather, but from presence. I shivered and pulled my hand away. It left a faint outline in the moisture, my own handprint, juxtaposed with the curve of something else, a shape that didn't quite match human weight, something too still. I didn't wait to think. I turned the key, threw the car into drive and pulled out of the lot. Tires kicked up water as I rejoined the highway. The windshield was still blank. But in the mirror, every few seconds, I saw what I thought was a shape seated in the back. Not clear, not full, just the idea of someone, like a memory that never belonged to me. I drove for almost 2 hours without stopping, didn't turn the radio on, didn't speak, just listened to the wheels roll under me and the hiss of rain as it trailed across the roof like fingernails over fabric. I passed through town after town, green signs blurred by water, headlights from the occasional truck slicing through the dark. I didn't look in the mirror again, not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because part of me was starting to expect something. The rain wasn't letting up. If anything, it was deepening, becoming heavier without sounding louder, like it was soaking not just the outside of the car, but time itself. The windshield stayed clean, too clean. Even when I turned the heat off completely, there was no fog, no buildup, no breath. I remember thinking, this is what it would feel like if the air wasn't mine. When I finally got home, around 5:30 a.m., the sky was still gray. No sunrise, just a faint change in texture, as if the world had paused between hours. I parked in front of my apartment complex and shut off the engine. I sat there, staring through the windshield. It looked ordinary now, just a film of mist and old bugs from the highway. I exhaled, long and slow. A second passed, then another. And then, just as the rain softened to a drizzle, I saw it. Letters, forming from the center of the windshield. Not from inside, not outside, from within. They didn't drag or streak. They materialized, like they'd always been there, only waiting for the right silence to surface. I watched as they curved inward. E, then N, then the rest. Enough. The letters were cleaner than the glass around them, sharper, like they'd been protected from erosion. And I realized something. They weren't a message for me. They were a repetition, a reenactment. I had driven someone else's route, sat in someone else's echo, and they had reached the point where silence stopped being safe, where the car, this sealed, dry space, became too small to hold what they couldn't say out loud. I didn't go inside right away. I stayed in the car until the letters faded, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to erase them, not until they erased themselves. I don't know whose voice I borrowed that night or whose memories I drove through, but I haven't taken that highway since. And sometimes, when it rains just the right way, I check the windshield and wait. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. There were 2 umbrellas outside my door, but I only brought one. This happened to me in 2021 during a week of non-stop rain. I was living alone in a small rental duplex just outside Tacoma. The place had charm, arched doorways, a sunroom, original hardwood, but it had quirks too. The front door never shut evenly unless you pulled it tight, and the windows all stuck during storms. Still, it felt safe, quiet, a little forgotten, but mine. I'd moved in 3 months earlier, after a breakup, my first time living alone since college. Most of the time I liked the silence. That week, though, it rained every single day. Not in bursts, but as a constant grey curtain draped over everything. The kind of weather where you lose track of time because the light never changes. I worked from home, and by Thursday, I hadn't left the house in 2 full days. That morning, I went to take the trash out. I opened the front door and paused. There were 2 umbrellas propped against the siding just outside. One was mine. A dark green collapsible umbrella with a fraying strap. The other was almost identical. Same length, same fabric, same little tear near the tip, but I only owned one. I stood there in the doorway, heart suddenly loud in my chest. The second umbrella wasn't wet, not soaked from rain, not dry like it had been indoors. Damp, as if it had been used, then left there briefly. My first thought was I must have forgotten bringing it out before, but there was nowhere else it could have come from. I hadn't left the house since Tuesday. I'd only used my umbrella once, on Monday, when I ran to the corner store. I knelt down and looked closer. The second umbrella had a tiny scratch on the plastic handle, not random, curved, like a fingernail had dragged across it. That's when my stomach flipped, because I remembered that scratch. I'd made it. I did it 3 weeks ago, fumbling with my keys in the dark. I remember being annoyed about it. I'd pressed too hard. I knew that mark, which meant one of them wasn't the second. One of them was mine. I picked them both up slowly. Same weight, same smell, faint mildew, synthetic fabric. I tried to tell myself I was confused. Maybe I bought a second one and forgot. Maybe I borrowed one, but my chest felt tight, like something had already crossed the line and I was just catching up. I brought both umbrellas inside and leaned them by the front door. Then I locked it, tight. The click echoed louder than usual. It was later that same evening when I noticed it had moved. The second umbrella, it had been leaning beside the door, right next to its twin. I remember the symmetry. It stuck with me for some reason, like a mirror trying too hard. But now, one of them, the scratched one, was angled differently, turned outward slightly, closer to the entryway rug. I stared at it for a while, trying to decide if I was just remembering wrong. Then I picked both up again. They felt the same. Still damp, still cold. I laid them both flat this time, side by side on the ground. Then I went to the kitchen. Later that night, as the rain picked up again, I heard thunder. Faint, distant, the kind that echoes more than it cracks. I was curled up on the couch reading. The light from the single lamp in the corner made the room feel smaller, like everything beyond it was out of bounds. Another low rumble, then lightning, a white flicker that painted the windows for a split second. I looked up. One umbrella was standing. Not both, just one. The scratched one, propped against the side of the couch. I don't remember getting up. I just stared, pulse flattening to silence. It wasn't just the movement, it was the fact that I hadn't heard it. No shift, no scrape, no bump of plastic against wood, only lightning, then change. I stood slowly, walked over to it. The umbrella was closed, but loosely. The Velcro strap was half unwrapped, as if it had been used. I knelt and touched the fabric. drier than before. My breath caught in my throat. I moved both umbrellas to the sunroom and closed the door behind them. I didn't sleep that night. Every flash of lightning made me look up, and once, just before dawn, I heard something soft, like the roll of something tubular. But when I checked the door, it was still closed. By Saturday, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Every time I left the room, the umbrella had moved, slightly. Sometimes it leaned a few inches to the left. Once it was turned fully backward, handle facing the door. I started documenting it, taking photos on my phone each time I left the room. I even marked its position with chalk once, just to be sure. It always changed, but only that one, never its twin. I started reading online forums, old archives, rain-related folk tales. Most of it was nonsense, but one post stuck with me. It talked about certain weather conditions, places where rain wasn't just a symbol, but a condition that enabled things. Places where certain objects, exposed long enough to wet silence, became more than just things, not cursed, not alive, but used, made hollow by neglect, then filled, not by ghosts, not by spirits, by fragments, thoughts, fixations, unfinished warnings. Vessels, one user called them, rain-locked carriers of repetition, not haunted, repeated. I couldn't explain what was happening, but I knew I didn't want it in the house anymore. So I took both umbrellas, both just to be sure, and opened the front door. The rain was soft, grey, misty. I placed them both outside, handles down, tips leaning against the brick. I stepped back inside and closed the door. I stood there, one hand still on the knob, waited, 1 minute, then 2. Then I opened the door again. The doormat was bone dry, which made no sense. It had been raining for hours, but it was dry, and on it, upright and centered, one umbrella. The other, the scratched one, was gone. I turned slowly, and there it was, inside, leaning casually against the inside wall, as if it had never left. I didn't move for a long time, didn't breathe. I remember feeling something impossible, like the umbrella was waiting for me to speak first. I don't know why I did it, but I reached for it. The fabric was still damp, but only on the side that had been facing the door. The inside was dry, completely dry. I carried it to the center of the room, laid it on the hardwood, and this time I spoke out loud. I don't want you here. I don't know who I was talking to or what, but I meant it. I left it there overnight. When I woke up the next morning, it was gone, just gone. No marks, no footprints. The door still locked. The other umbrella was outside, soaked and slumped, only one now, and I never saw the second again. But sometimes when it rains heavily, I hear a soft roll on the floorboards. Not a thump, not a knock, just something shifting. And every now and then I check the door and see the mat is dry, too dry, like something's already come in.